Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Stores, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have somebody on the episode today that I'm very excited to talk to. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
My name is Krangus Gillespie. I was an intelligence analyst in 2010, serving in the Afghanistan theater I was the G2 analyst, all source. And then my second deployment, I was a CI HET analyst, which they later called CHD.
Okay, excellent. And so would you say that military intelligence would be your area of expertise?
Yes.
Excellent. I feel like I'm a pretty knowledgeable person about military intelligence, maybe not to the extent that you are, but my understanding of military intelligence is that it all starts from the recruitment side of things, just like anything with the military. And you want to get the best possible candidates you can. And for military intelligence, it's not just your physical capabilities, not just your mental capabilities, but it's like this ability to combine them at long stretches and long periods of time. And so, pretty in the past, what they would do is they would actively recruit at board game conventions. So, you would get Risk, Stratego, these games where people are playing these games for hours on end, highly competitive if they could as well. And then they would say, okay, well, this person was able to play 17 hours of Risk. So they'll probably be able to figure out and have the endurance to be a good military intelligence officer. But in the modern world, as our board games and as our video games have advanced, what I think that they've kind of recognized in this time period is that there's a lot of video games that you wouldn't necessarily think would have immediate transition into the world of military intelligence. So you have things like Civilization. Those games can be really good and also usually are played over a long period of time. Well, it might not be something you would expect initially. The game Undertale, played in a very particular and very destructive mentality, is also something that can be a good indicator of somebody's success in military intelligence. And I think that with a lot of tech firms, they've taken this idea of this military intelligence board game life, so to speak, trademark, and they've kind of put it into their hackathons. And hackathons are basically just military intelligence LAN parties where people would just come together and be like, hey, this is our off time. We should probably brush up on our games of Risk and Stratego or whatever board game that they would ultimately be playing, and figure out their gloom havens, maybe in the modern world, and things with a lot of rules. These games where you have to sit down for 30 minutes to an hour to really get the details of this is how you play it. And that's really how they can tell that somebody's going to be good at military intelligence, because during that 30 minutes to an hour, they're taking notes and they're figuring out the loopholes. And that's what you want from a military intelligence officer, because you want to be able to read the dynamic of the culture and community, but be like, okay, this is kind of how we can demonstrate ourselves and figure out what is best to advance our goals as a military force. And the tech world, what happens is they use the hackathon kind of mentality of how effectively can we go in and figure out where all of these flaws are. Similarly, how military intelligence is trying to figure out how there are flaws in an enemy campaign or an enemy military strategy or their own strategy itself. And then also with the G2, that's a subset. One of the things that people don't know a lot about with the military and with the government in general is a lot of stuff is compartmentalized. You don't necessarily get a lot of access. And then as I understand it, the G2 analyst is an analyst that specifically targets and focuses on professional wrestling in Japan. And and because so we all know about the G1 climax and how it's New Japan's biggest event and how there's all of these different combatants trying to get together and get a shot at the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. But with the G2, it's an overarching thing of looking at Japan as a whole and all of the different wrestlers and organizations and figuring out who's going to be the next big guy, who's going to be the next ace in the Japanese wrestling world. And so I think that that's a big thing that a lot of people don't know about, that our military has a component of. of making sure that we understand Japanese professional wrestling culture. Now, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say was accurate?
Man, what is this gotcha journalism? You nailed it.
Oh, yeah? Okay, fantastic.
Holy shit. All right. I mean, I should add that I was an enlisted guy. I mean, I know that you got to went off on a weird Japanese. I actually have a Ribera Steakhouse jacket in the other room. We don't have camera, but I got that.
Okay, very cool.
Obviously, that was we were joking there, but no, I mean, as far as like the gaming thing, I know what you're like referencing, and it seems a lot like urban myths about how the CIA used to recruit. I don't think that's ever been proven.
Okay,
I think all the CIA guys I ever knew, like they started in the military and then went contractor and then maybe got their degree in counterterrorism and then applied,
I see.
just like any other job, really.
Hmm.
As far as the way I got in, it was, I mean, come on, I was in the Marine Corps. I was in the dumbest like branch you could be in. This is the way the recruiter got me because they basically make you take the ASVAB,
Hmm.
and if you score above a certain amount, they go, well, we don't have a whole lot of people that do intel, so let's get this guy into that. And this guy, he sees me as a 19-year-old kid, and he sees me because it's like a used car deal where they
Okay.
have like little packets of different jobs you can do in the military. And he saw me looking at intel, and he saw my eyes light up because he knew that I'm like a 19-year-old idiot that's like, oh, I'm gonna be Jason Bourne. And he sees that eye light up, and he's like, oh yeah, man, bro, we're gonna drop you off in Afghanistan, and you're gonna put a fake beard on you, and you're gonna be slaying bodies, bro. And I was like, sign me the fuck up, bro.
Yeah,
That's how the recruitment happened.
there's a 2-week intensive on the use of a pencil to attack people, or a pen, or whatever it was.
I mean, there are the actual training definitely incorporates a lot of game, like war game stuff, though. So I mean, there is.
Hmm.
It wasn't risk, but we would just make up our own. Like for I went to Nimitz, which is the Navy Marine Corps Intelligence Training Center in Virginia Beach, and our FinX was basically we set up a deployment, and we were all G2 analysts, and you cover when you're at a basic G2 shop, you're covering, you got targeting section, you got atmospherics, you have your COC that handles the day-to-day operations of our green forces. You're trying to really just combine all that information, make an assessment of potentially predicting the future outcomes of what the enemy might do, and then presenting that to a commander so that that commander can make the decision on what to do. That's pretty much the gist of it.
Hmm. That's interesting. So basically, what you were doing is setting up like tabletop RPGs, but like in a military setting. Is that kind of accurate to say?
Yeah, I'd say so. That's pretty. I mean, it's a nerdy way to say it, but I mean that's exactly what it is. It's like a game,
That's
where we're
interesting.
pretending that we're, and they would put us out in a tent like we were actually on a deployment, and they gave us little, and then of course we actually did the job. Then that's doing all source, so that's you're getting all the intel from, you got signals in intel where they're like listening in on radios or like phone conversations, and then you got human, which is like both. Well, the Marine Corps combines counterintelligence and human, so that's where they're doing source information and like interrogations. And then you have like your ground sensor platoons that monitor enemy movement, and then you kind of, again, you just combine all that information. My second deployment, though, I was an analyst for a hedge, so that's the human guys.
Okay.
So then my job was I would help with the TQ, which is the tactical questioning that you do before the interrogation to establish what the interrogatees motivations are. And then from there, the interrogator can make, basically from there, establish what approach they're going to use when they go into the booth.
So that way they know whether or not they need to be good cop or bad cop, or like offer them a donut or whatever it would be.
Yeah, yeah. I always thought it would be like really cool to be an interrogator, but really, like all the approaches that they learn, it's all shit that our parents did to us when we were kids. So like the we
Like
know all approach, where like you come in and you have like a folder of a bunch of crap that and you just say, yeah, we know about this, this, and this, and it makes them scared, and then they just start admitting to everything. That's something that my mom did to me whenever I like snuck out of the house and came back. She'd be like, "I know about this," and then I'd freak out and then spill the beans. So it's sexy until you realize, oh, like I already knew about this.
right, yeah, they're doing maybe not necessarily reverse psychology, but basically saying like, here's everything we know. And
Yeah,
it feels so overwhelming that you're like, well, I guess they probably know everything. I may as well tell them,
right.
I may as well fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. What part did you find most engaging or most like rewarding, if that is the right word to use?
In the job,
Yeah,
I
in the
think
job itself, what did you enjoy the most?
I think it was making those assessments by making the connections between things, like finding out things. Because you, as an analyst, you do have the power to send out what's called SDRs, where you're basically source directive requirements, where you're sending, like, whether it's signals or human, you're sending, hey, like, we need to know about this. So when your next interrogation or your next source meet, ask this so that we can. And so, like, I think being able to make those connections and then basically being able to stop bad things before they happen,
Right.
by being able to. Everybody hates intel because they act like we never have the right stuff, but that's typically because the infantry units aren't trusting us enough to give us their intel, their side of it. So they think that operations drive intel, but if operations are driving intel, that's a that's a bad situation because that means they're going into everything blind. So being able to actually provide real intel and real assessments for the commander to make right decisions on, that was the most rewarding part.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it sounds like it was probably fairly stressful. Would that be an accurate assessment? Like, or were there like periods where it was kind of relaxed and then there was like real crunch times, or was it kind of
Oh yeah.
like a perpetual kind of stress?
Well, so like my second deployment, I was attached to an infantry battalion, so we're kind of like the nerds that get fucked with. Yeah, like you've known me as a comedian, and I felt like I had this weird tough guy like persona that everybody looked at, but it was like I was kind of like the little bitch in the Marine Corps. I don't know why y'all look at me like that. I
Hmm.
get that it's the Marines, but I wasn't that guy in my unit. I was like the guy that I got tossed around all the time. That
Yeah.
wasn't, but that wasn't that stressful. The stressful part was the fact that like none of like signals and because everything's compartmentalized. Signal, it was really hard to get all the sections to work together to release intel in a time because intel only stays valuable for a certain amount of time, especially when it's tactical level. If and by tactical I mean things that okay, this guy's setting up a bomb over here. I need to know that now so that before and if signals would be they were the worst at it. They would send in these reports. They were called TAC reps, and they would send in these reports, and it would say something like unidentified male conducted nefarious activities in an unidentified location with another unidentified. And you're like, what? This doesn't tell me shit. Like I know bad things are going on. I need to know when and where, like and who.
Right. Yeah, you need to
And
have
so it was like basically they're giving me the black lines, and I'm like, man, like this doesn't help because now you're giving me this useless information, and then this could have been saving lives for our own guys, and even like Afghans. Like there really was like a winning the hearts and minds campaign, and like we could be helping these people, and you're not giving me the intel. But then on the other side, our human guys were unwilling to give up our sources,
right.
so they would do the same thing, and it was just a constant. As an analyst, you're the guy that's in between all that,
Hmm.
and you're trying to get them to work together. And it's sometimes that's the stressful part is getting people to release intel to each other because they're stingy with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine that being like really difficult and like to the dynamic of like how you're presented or how you're like interpreted in different group dynamics. It's really funny because like one person's like, "Oh, I'm it's kind of like the going to a new high school dynamic, but like if you went to a high school and you were picked on a bunch but like you kind of got tough because like you had to like create this exterior that's tough, then you go to a complete a high school that's like it's have you ever seen the OC?
No,
It's like the OC. I feel like what you experience is like basically a perfect intersection with the OC. No notes, nothing different at all. I can understand that because I feel like a lot of people experience that kind of in one group dynamic, they're one thing, and then in another group dynamic, they're like, oh, like I'm not being treated the same way, and that can be kind of jarring if you're accustomed to it.
well,
Uh,
also I was just talking about this that I was in when WikiLeaks happened. So
okay,
when that happened, it made our job so hard because
okay,
now releasing any information to like cross like subsections of other areas became it used to be just stick a thumb drive in it and we just trust you because you have a clearance. But then it became you gotta get like 9 people to sign off on it so you can get one PowerPoint slide.
right,
And
yeah,
again, Intel only stays valuable for a limited amount of time. So that
absolutely.
between the sections and then having the Julian Assange thing happen at the same time, it was bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, with the compartmentalization too, right? With there's the idea that a lot of people making that assumption about like, oh, you just get security clearance and you have access to everything.
Yeah, I mean, my family, they were all, my family was all proud of me because they were like, our boy's going to be James Bond. And then when I first got to school, they gave us our Sipper is the like the secret server that you get on, and then JWix is the top secret. Then when I first got to school, I was like, I'm gonna learn about JFK, and then
Right.
it's like, oh no, it's you get read into specific things that you need to know. It's specific things that you need to know to do your job. You don't need to know. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get read into, and it's all different programs. I'm not gonna some of the programs I was read into is still classified, so I'm not going to go into that because
Hmm.
I did sign a lot of NDAs when I got out. But for the most part, it's most of the intel is it's just tactical stuff. We're
Right.
keeping this a secret so that the enemy doesn't know what we know about them. You know what I mean? Like that's not.
Right.
It's not like you get your JWix password and then suddenly why the pyramids were built.
Right. Yeah. They're not giving away all the secrets in one fell swoop. It's kind of like use the parlance of pyramids, it's kind of like a pyramid scheme. You have to kind of, or like Scientology, you have to keep buying in and getting deeper and deeper, and then you get access to the real juicy details about all of the aliens and their
Yeah,
ability.
basically Scientology. That's
Right.
the
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
you gotta pay for it. So or the
Exactly.
Masons, I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. Krangus, this has been so fascinating and so insightful. If people wanted to learn more about this topic or wanted to learn more about you, where would you recommend they go?
Well, I mean, my website is www.krangus.com, and yeah, I'm a comedian. That's just gonna give you tour dates and stuff and my videos. But as far as like intel type stuff, I think that they've declassified a lot. If you just go to the CIA.gov, I mean, all their declass information is there. If anybody's ever interested in seeing real like intel that's declassified, because classification gets declassed every like 10 to 50 years depending on the level of it, so
Right.
they release that stuff. It's out there.
Okay.
They have the Freedom of Information Act. You can definitely look things up without having access to any of the servers that we used to have access to. Oh, I forgot to mention one of the
Yeah.
things in it. I was hoping to bring it up but it never got brought up. One of the things you might have appreciated that we did pretty regularly training wise, we
Hmm.
actually did debate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I never thought that would happen, but like in our shops when we would like practice and shit, we would do debating.
Oh,
Like you have
that's
to
really
argue the
interesting.
affirmative and all that stuff. But it's so yeah, that's
Yeah.
the last bit.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I feel like I learned so much and I can't thank you enough. My name's Matt Stores, and this has been Mattsplaining.